All right, good people. We only have 20 minutes, so there is no mucking around time here, unfortunately. So come and take your seats. Dion, congrats on the new gig. You were promoted recently. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. Good, bad, or otherwise. I'm now, as well as looking after Frontier Touring in Australia, I'm also overseeing our AEG Presents operation up through Asia, so across all of APAC, with, hopefully the idea that we can continue to build the bridge between those two great markets and take advantage of, the opportunity that's here in Asia.
So what are your first impressions of the APAC gig?
Yeah, look, it's very different to operating in a market like Australia where everything is quite similar everywhere you go. I don't know whether the team, and half of them are here, but I don't know whether the team did this on purpose, but the first budget I looked at for a tour in Asia was an artist where we were budgeting to do 40,000 people in Manila and 1,200 in Tokyo. And I can't imagine saying to an agent, hey, we're going to do a stadium in Melbourne, but we're going to do a club in Sydney. So, just different.
We should talk a little bit about Australia, and you've been involved in some of the greatest tours of all time. It would probably make sense to mention Ed Sheeran, who's coming back. But there was a record that stood since, I think, 1986. It was Dire Straits. They sold 950,000 tickets in Australia when we had 14 million population. 2018, I think it was 2018. Yeah. Ed Sheeran did how many?
We did just under 1.1 million tickets. Dire Straits had to be in the country for something like 4 months and travel around and play all the arenas and go to every city. I think we did 24 shows maybe in stadiums, but amazing success on that run. Ed came back in 2022 and did another 850,000 tickets, and we'll probably do similar in February next year. So it's quite a phenomenal record for him. There is nothing quite like the love that Australians have for him, and I know probably it's somewhat universal, right?
That's absolutely mind-boggling. 1.1 million. So if you extrapolated that for an American population, I think they're 15 times our population. So that would be an artist doing...
Taylor Swift-like numbers.
60, yeah, Taylor Swift-type numbers. So congratulations. There's a very old-school concert promoting story behind Ed Sheeran and the company's relationship with Ed, because he's almost like a family member, and Mushroom Group and Frontier Touring, which is part of Mushroom Group, it is like a family, right? We hear this written in press releases all the time, welcome to the family, but it actually is a family.
Yeah, a little bit. Look, it's funny, the introduction we talked about Michael Gudinski and Ed, the relationship between Ed and Michael was quite legendary. Ed, in his bar in Suffolk, has a statue of Michael. One hand like this, one hand ready to hold a wine glass so that Ed can put a glass of wine in the statue at any time and have a drink. And whenever songwriters go and hang out at Ed's place and do some songwriting with him, we get photos sent through of them and Ed and the statue, and it's getting more and more adornments and hats and lanyards and stuff put on it every day, so it's starting to look pretty unique there. But it's quite this extraordinary thing, but it all started, Ed came out, so Ed's manager, Stuart Camp, was an intern, I think, or certainly a junior staffer at Mushroom Records some 30 years ago in London, and when they started in London. And he rang Michael and said, look, I've got this young artist coming out to do some showcases for the label. I'd love you to come along. And Michael committed to going, remembered who Stuart was, apparently rainy night in Melbourne, heading to the studio to see it, and went to the wrong place. And he basically decided, and said, I missed it, doesn't matter. Anyway, was convinced by one of the staff to go across town in the rain, in the traffic, and get there. So he got there through the side door for the last 3 songs, loved what he heard. They went out, probably ended up in the casino, were out till 3 in the morning, and a great love affair from there went on. So.
Michael was very special. We should stick with Michael just for another moment or two. There is another statue of Michael outside Rod Laver Arena in that similar pose. How many concert promoters have a statue of themselves outside the biggest arena in their hometown? Not many is the answer.
Not many would be the answer. I'm not aware of any others. But, Michael, Michael's probably responsible for me being here in this role in some weird, indirect way. I first met Adam Wilkes in, I think, 2014, and I was working at Mushroom, and I was in Melbourne, and Michael was away in Sydney, and he rings me at 8:30 in the morning, and Michael was an old school concert promoter. He never rang anybody at 8:30 in the morning, like that's, unless it was on the way to bed. And so he rang and said, "What are you doing today?" And I'm like, "I'm going to work." "What? Why?" "Come to Sydney, you got to have lunch with this bloke." "What?" It's like, "There's Adam Wilkes bloke, I met him yesterday, like he's you know, he's smart and he's young and you'd like him and you're not that old." And so he made me fly to Sydney on an hour's notice to go have lunch with Adam, and that's where I first met Adam, and ultimately I think probably the reason I'm sitting here.
Very different characters. I saw Adam speak here some years ago. Very clever guy, relocated to China as a young man. What is some of the best advice those two gentlemen have given you?
Oh, gee, we didn't practice that one, Lars. Look, I think Michael's just all about the passion, right? So if you break down what we do and take it to its simplest possible form, Michael was not a corporate promoter. He wasn't somebody who was worried about the bottom line. He was trusting that if you did the right thing by the artist, if you cared about the fans, then the bottom line would follow. And so I think what I picked up from Michael is that, you know, don't spend every last minute thinking about where you're going to eke out another dollar. Try and make it the best possible experience for your artist. Match them to the right venues where the fans get to have the best experience, and success will follow that. So I think Michael ingrained that in me. And then with Adam, you know, he had put so much of his life into this territory up here and in learning the idiosyncrasies of it. And so, you know, he remains somebody I'm talking to every other day because, you know, it is interesting and different, right? At AEG, we've done concerts so far this year in 12 or 13 countries, 28 different cities, you know, different languages, different currencies, different local customs, different regulations, different rules. You know, we've got an amazing team that can navigate that entire ecosystem across this whole region out of a couple of centralised offices. And so, you know, that is something that's quite foreign to me. And so I think Adam has been very good at helping me understand and navigate that, you know, you'll never understand it, but maybe you just have to ride with it.
Before we talk a little bit about the business of touring, you work with also one of the other Michaels, one of the all-time greats of concert promotion. What a thing to work with Michael Gudinski and Michael Chugg.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And Chuggy's just a beautiful man. He's got this very gruff exterior. And when Michael Gudinski died, somebody interviewed him and said, you know, "Oh, so what's your role in the big new structure?" And he's like, "I'm just going to hang around, and when they'll roll me out when they want someone to say fuck a lot." And he just brings so much more than that. Again, there's just a wisdom there, but there's a really good heart in Chuggy, and he's just someone who really, you know, cares deeply and passionately about our industry, cares deeply and passionately about the staff. And so, you know, he brings that to our business and is like sort of having that sort of, you know, it's like having the good angel on your shoulder the whole time.
He does swear a lot too. He's a really impressive swearer. I did a keynote with Chuggy many years ago, and I surreptitiously took notes on every swear word, and I read them out at the end. It was
amazing. He's on it too. He loves a conference.
Yeah, he loves it. Australia, the touring market, it seems always to be either really hot or smoking hot. We have an extraordinary few weeks later in the year where we have Oasis, we have Metallica, we have AC/DC. All in market roughly at the same time, playing stadiums. Then we have Lady Gaga and we have that chap Ed Sheeran. But it sort of masks having all of those stadium shows and then not all of your shows that's spread around. Some of them are. But it does mask a little bit of the troubles that there are at the lower tiers. What's the touring space like at the moment?
Look, I think... Look, at the stadium level, there's more shows than there's ever been. I mean, I hope I'm not speaking out of school, but Marvel Stadium in Melbourne have a resident cricket team, and they're talking about how cricket's now getting in the way of like the concert season, and maybe they need to think about whether they can get their cricket team to go play somewhere else, right? Like they had 15 or 16 or 17 shows last year. You know, 5-6 years ago, if a stadium had 2 or 3 concerts a year, it was a good year. So it's become quite incredible at the top end. I think for artists, the challenge that we're facing is just that that real learn your chops grassroots level. You know, I don't know whether it's the artist, I don't know whether it's the audience, I don't know where the chicken and egg sits, but kids are not going out to see live music by artists or live music that they're not familiar with already, that they don't already know the songs, and getting them to do that as part of their cultural experience or as part of their night out or as part of their journey is what we need to do to then try and get grassroots artists in front of audiences to learn their craft and to be able to develop their careers. You know, the great bands of an era ago would go out and play 4 nights a week and really learn their craft and really learn how to connect with audiences, good, bad and otherwise, audiences that were hostile to them and audiences that were really on their side. So I think at that end of the market, finding opportunities for emerging artists to play in front of audiences is becoming harder and harder to do.
We spoke the other day about how challenging it is, but then there is that flip side. You were in London recently in Hyde Park, and you saw a number of artists who couldn't sell a theatre 4 or 5 years ago, and who are now absolutely smashing it.
Yeah, for the young artists, I mean, there's hope there. I don't know whether it's this boom and bust thing, but AEG puts together the Hyde Park British Summertime Concert Series, and I was lucky enough to be there this year for the first 2 weekends. The artists were Olivia Rodrigo, 2 nights of Zach Bryan, Noah Khan with Gracie Abrams, and 2 nights of Sabrina Carpenter. So Hyde Park holds 65,000 people, so between 65 and 130,000 for each of those artists. Not one of them was worth 2,500 tickets in London 2.5 years ago. So that's how quick it now can happen and how quick it can turn around and how big artists can get in such a short period of time. And that's probably, you reeled off a whole heap of heritage acts, but that's what's fueling a lot of the stadium stuff as well. Artists are playing multiple arena nights or stadiums on the second album. That's not what was happening 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, so there's a lot of promise there. There's a conversation that's been happening in the Australian music industry for a little while about Australian artists struggling to be seen and heard. With Spotify, there's 100 and something million songs ingested into that system. So how do you be seen and heard above that? Same with the touring space, with the big tours. It's really dominated by American and British acts. And there has been a novel approach in Australia to try to support Australian artists on the live scene with something called Michael's Rule. Do you want to take that on?
Yeah, look, so Michael's Rule, not Michael Gudinski, by the way, for once. Everybody who was anybody in the music industry in Australia was named Michael.
Michael Koppel.
But Michael's Rule is an attempt by the industry to have every international artist put an Australian on as an opener or a support act. The principle of it is very good. As I said before, it's interesting for us. We come out of that mushroom incubator, Australian artist support, Michael Gudinski background. We are passionately supportive of our local domestic scene and our local domestic artists. But we also are aware that, we might have a 25-year-old female pop act who has just blown up and gone from 2,500 to 65,000 in the last 2 years, is feeling reasonably uncomfortable, is surrounding herself with people she trusts and with people she knows, and her backstage space is, a fairly sacred space. And so it's not quite simple. We're certainly doing everything we can to support Michael's Rule. I think last year we had something like 87% of our shows had an Australian opener or support act on them. To me, that's probably about the right level, because I think the 13 that didn't had a very good reason not to.
And the state of New South Wales has offered incentives to venues, cut price to host performers who will use Michael's Rule for their shows?
Yeah, and I'd love to see that more often. I mean, ultimately what they've done for this room is that the venues have said that they will reduce the rent on the venue if you have an Australian artist as support and you announce them at the time you announce the concert. It's a lot better way to try and convince international acts, talk to international agents about it with a carrot, rather than, you might get shamed in the media, or Lars might write a bad article about you if you don't do it. So, better way to go about it.
for the story I wrote on you in Billboard's Power Players list. You spoke about climate change, and that's something that you see firsthand when you're doing outdoor shows. It's becoming a greater problem year on year. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what can be done?
Look, I think it's. I think the common theory is that you're seeing much bigger extremes, right? So, yeah, it used to rain a bit at a show. Well, now it might rain it might be 3 inches of rain in the day of the show, and you can't run it anymore. It's not safe. Or, you used to get a storm, now you get a really bad storm. The extremes of weather, they've always been a thing, but the extremes of weather now just make planning outdoor shows in particular really, really tricky. And so, you are, and in different parts of Australia, we have different sort of weather patterns. It's a very big place, and so we sort of struggle with that as well, because you're trying to put a touring season together where you're probably trying to play 4 or 5 or 6 cities outdoors, and playing outdoors in Brisbane in January's pretty dire. Playing any further north than Brisbane, it's almost a don't go there, but it's the time of the year to do it down in Victoria or South Australia. So it's tricky, but yeah, look, I think it's one of those challenges for particularly big outdoor shows.
One of the other challenges is the fact that in Australia, the venues, the stadiums are multi-purpose. So on any given week or month, you could have rugby played on the same pitch that you're hosting a concert, which then goes back to rugby, and there are a number of stakeholders, and you need to treat the turf well. It's complicated, right?
This is not the right room if you're trying to get me to tee off about how much they charge us for turf, Lars. But yeah, look, it's complicated. They've got to fit things in. As I said before, I know there's a stadium that's talking about trying to encourage their cricket team to see other stadiums.
There's a great headline there about the Australian music industry complaining about the price of grass.
Yeah, well, they took a fortune for grass. Costs $1 billion. You can buy it at Bunnings for a lot less.
We've done really well. Last time Dion and myself were on stage together, we were given 90 minutes. We're like two Usain Bolts running next to each other. We've done really well. Should we talk a little about the flow of Asia pop into Australia? It's really exploding. We're seeing some a stadium and arena-sized acts coming from this region.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really interesting, different mindset for me. I mean, Frontier Touring, there are Australian artists that break overseas and have international careers, but Frontier Touring hasn't sort of been the type of organisation that has traditionally been an exporter. We bring shows in or we domestically promote, but we haven't necessarily been an exporter. And with AEG in this region, we're forming relationships in Korea in the K-pop scene. We're forming relationships in Japan. We have great properties around the world. Things like Coachella and the like, where there's a real desire and hunger to see some of the Asian pop acts come and play, really make a name for themselves on those properties. And so it's a really different business experience for me to be looking at this role as both an exporter and an importer. But yeah, it's amazing to see. They're incredible shows. The production is always on point. And it's exciting. It's an exciting genre that I think is just continuing to grow in the West. We were just doing some K-pop acts in the US, and I think we did 14 K-pop acts in the US this year. And we started to do outside the top 4 or 5 normal cities that you do K-pop acts in, and we had the first ever arena act to sell out in Nashville for a K-pop act. So, that's an important step. If they can leave and go play America, and instead of having 5 cities, there's 7 cities, or there's 9 cities, or there's 12 cities, then it obviously just multiplies and becomes a really key thing.
Dion, if we had more time, I would probably want to talk about the Foo Fighters tours that you've done. I'd probably want to talk about the Paul McCartney tours that you've done, and the multiple Bruce Springsteen tours, and the fact he's been in the press talking about maybe coming to Australia next year and what that might look like. I would want to talk about all of those things, but sadly, we've run out of time.
That's it.
Dion, thank you so much.
Don.
Please thank Dion Brant.
Thank you.